You know that feeling, right? That persistent sense of me.
Versus the world.
Exactly. Me, the subject, looking out at everything else, the object. It's just so fundamental, isn't it, to how we operate? Shapes our whole understanding of who we are.
Oh, absolutely. It's like the bedrock of our conventional experience. It defines everything, really. Personal boundaries, how we interact with, complex systems, everything.
Absolutely. And today, well, we're diving deep into the tension this creates, this central dialectic between duality, our usual view, distinct things,
Planned operation,
and non-duality, this insight that actually reality might be undivided, a seamless whole.
And this isn't just some, abstract philosophy thing. This tension, it's shaped millennia of human thought.
Totally.
Influencing ancient spiritual traditions, right up to cutting-edge neuroscience today.
Yeah, so for this deep dive, we've pulled together quite a stack of sources, everything from the Upanishads, Descartes,
Big names,
to modern brain imaging studies. And our mission really is to pull out the key nuggets for you, help you understand this, well, pretty transformative inquiry into self and cosmos.
Without getting totally lost in the weeds.
Exactly. Because this isn't just theory. It really does impact our daily lives, how we see ourselves. Okay, so let's unpack this. Before we can really get our heads around oneness, we kind of need to understand the architecture of separation first. How did cultures, thinkers, structure reality around these distinct categories?
It's actually striking how universal this impulse is, this need to divide things up. Dualism gives us these powerful lenses, mind and body, spirit and matter.
Useful frameworks.
They offer clarity in some ways, but they also create some really profound problems, philosophically and practically.
Okay, so thinking about the Western tradition.
Yeah.
The mind-body split is probably the most famous one, right? It goes way back.
Right back to Plato, yeah.
Yeah.
He had this metaphysical dualism. You've got the eternal, perfect realm of forms.
Up there somewhere.
And then there's our messy, changing sensory world down here. And the soul that's immaterial, trapped in the physical body, just trying to get back to the forms.
Liberation.
Exactly. But then, fast forward to the 17th century, and you get René Descartes. He gave us the really classical formulation.
A big one.
Yeah. Through his methodical doubt, questioning everything. He lands on, I think, therefore I am. Cogito ergo sum. And this leads him to make what he called a real distinction between res cogitans, the thinking, non-extended mind.
Mind stuff.
And the extended non-thinking body, physical stuff.
That's such a huge moment in Western thought. It wasn't just academic, was it? It really embedded this idea of thinking me totally separate from the body.
Oh, deeply.
And that split still shapes how we think about ourselves. Even mental health today, you could argue.
Absolutely. But here's the catch. His elegant solution immediately created this massive challenge, the mind-body problem. If mind and body are fundamentally different things, one not physical, one physical, how on earth do they interact? How does a thought move your arm?
Good question.
Princess Elizabeth of Bohemia called him out on it directly. And his answer, involving the pineal gland, well, most people found it pretty unconvincing.
Didn't really stick, did it? So later on in more modern philosophy, we get things like property dualism. Is that like a halfway house?
Kind of, yeah. It's a more nuanced view. It suggests there's just one physical substance, the brain, basically.
Okay.
But this one substance has two totally different kinds of properties. Physical properties and mental properties. Consciousness emerges from the brain.
But isn't a separate thing.
Exactly. It acknowledges conscious experience is unique, but avoids Descartes' interaction problem because there aren't two substances trying to connect.
Interesting. But dualism isn't just a Western thing, right?
Not at all.
Yeah.
It pops up elsewhere in radically different forms. Take the Samkhya school, ancient Indian philosophy. Very different setup.
How so?
It posits two ultimate realities. First, Purusha. That's pure, inactive witness consciousness. And crucially, they believed there wasn't just one Purusha, but a plurality of individual ones.
Okay, multiple witnesses.
Right. And then there's Prakriti. That's active, unconscious nature. And here's the key difference from Descartes. Prakriti includes not just physical stuff, but also the mind, the intellect, the ego.
Ah, so the mind is part of the material side in Samkhya.
Precisely. So their problem isn't the Cartesian mind-body interaction issue.
Because they're both Prakriti.
Exactly. The Samkhya problem is that the Purusha, the pure consciousness, mistakenly identifies itself with the activities of Prakriti, with the thoughts, feelings, sensations.
Gets caught up in the show.
Kind of, yeah. So the goal is liberation, kaivalya, which comes through viveka, discriminating wisdom. realizing Purusha's total independence from all that mental and physical activity.
Okay, and what about, say, Christian theology? Is there a dualism there?
A very fundamental one, yes, but different again. It's the absolute ontological distinction, a separation in being itself between God, the creator.
Infinite, self-existent.
Right, a deity existing from itself, uncaused. And then the entire created universe, which is finite, dependent, created ex nihilo out of nothing.
That creator-creature distinction is core, so the problem there would be
Idolatry, essentially. Confusing the creation with the creator or worshiping the finite instead of the infinite. This creates an ethical, spiritual gap often understood as sin.
And the goal.
Redeemed communion with God. Bridging that gap through grace, but importantly, maintaining the fundamental distinction between creator and creature. It's not about merging, but about relationship.
Wow. Okay, so if you look across these, Cartesian, Samkhya, Christian, the key thing seems to be where they draw that line of separation.
Yep, that's exactly it. Descartes draws it between the mind and all matter, including the body.
Right.
Samkhya puts the mind firmly inside the material realm, prakriti, and separates that whole package from pure consciousness, purusha. And Christian theology draws the most fundamental line possible between the uncreated creator and the entire created cosmos.
And that difference explains so much. Why Samkhya doesn't have the mind-body problem, the mind is material for them, and why the goals are so different. Plato's soul escaping the body, Descartes' soul surviving death, Samkhya's consciousness disidentifying, Christian theology seeking communion, completely different maps of reality. Okay, so these dualistic maps, they help us navigate, but they also create these deep problems, these tensions. So it kind of makes sense that another powerful stream of thought just says, no, it argues reality is ultimately one, unified.
Exactly. And just like with dualism, the expressions of this oneness are incredibly diverse. You get everything from like radical identity to a more dynamic harmony.
Where should we start? Maybe Advaita Vedanta? That often comes up as the big one for non-duality.
Yeah, Advaita is arguably the most systematic school of non-dual thought, certainly from India. The core idea, the absolute punchline, is that the individual self, the Atman, is actually identical with the ultimate reality, Brahman.
Identical, not just connected, but the same thing.
Identical. And the world we see around us, the phenomenal world, it's considered to have a lesser order of reality. It's not ultimately real in the way Brahman is.
This isn't a new idea, right? It goes back to the Upanishads.
Deep roots, yes. You find these incredible statements in the Upanishads, the Mahavakyas, or great sayings, things like Tattvam Asi, that thou art.
You are that.
Directly affirming this identity. And it was Adi Shankara, a brilliant philosopher in the 8th century, who really systematized this whole vision.
So how did Shankara lay it out? What are the key pillars?
You can boil it down to 3 main points, really. First, Brahman Satyam. Brahman is the only reality. Unchanging, pure being, pure consciousness, pure bliss.
Okay, the ultimate ground.
Second, Jagat Mithya. The world Jagat is illusory Mithya. It's superimposed on Brahman due to our ignorance, our avidya. Shankara used the famous analogy of mistaking a rope for a snake in the dark.
The snake seems real, but it's just a misperception of the rope.
Precisely. The world seems real, but it's a misperception of Brahman. And third, the clincher, Jiva Brahmaivanapara. The individual self, the Jiva or Atman, is none other than Brahman. Our feeling of being separate is the core error.
So if ignorance, evya, is the problem, the solution must be knowledge.
Exactly. The path to liberation, moksha, isn't through ritual or action primarily, but through direct knowledge, jnana. It's a process called jnana yoga.
And that involves?
Systematically disidentifying from everything you perceive that isn't the true self. Thoughts, feelings, the body, roles, memories, peeling away the layers, often using the method of neti, meti.
Not this, not this.
Right. Negating every concept or object until only the unnegatable self, Brahman, remains.
Powerful stuff. But non-duality isn't just an Indian concept, is it? We see similar ideas elsewhere.
Absolutely. In Mahayana Buddhism, especially with the philosopher Nagarjuna, you get the concept of shunyata, usually translated as emptiness.
Which sounds a bit bleak.
It can sound that way,
yeah,
but it's not nihilism. It's the insight that all phenomena, everything we experience, including our sense of self, are empty of inherent independent existence. They don't have a solid standalone reality.
They depend on other things.
Exactly. They arise interdependently. It's a middle way that avoids extremes like things absolutely exist or nothing exists.
Yeah.
Zen Buddhism really runs with this, seeing samsara, the cycle of suffering, and nirvana, liberation, as non-dual. Enlightenment isn't escaping the world, but seeing its empty nature right here, right now.
Okay, what about Taoism? That feels like it has a sense of wholeness.
Very much so. In Taoism, the ultimate reality is the Tao emerges, the nameless, ineffable, undivided source of everything. And the world we see, the world of 10,000 things, emerges from the interplay of yin and yang.
The black and white symbol.
The Tai Chi too, yeah. That symbol perfectly shows they aren't static opposites, but complementary dynamic forces within a larger whole. Each contains the seed of the other. Wisdom in Taoism is about recognizing this underlying unity and harmonizing with it through Wu Wei.
Effortless action, acting in accordance with the flow.
Right. Not forcing things against their nature.
And Sufism within Islam. I thought Islam was strongly dualistic creator-creation.
Mainstream Islamic theology certainly emphasizes that absolute distinction, Tawhid primarily meaning the absolute oneness and uniqueness of God as creator. But Sufism, the mystical dimension of Islam, explores the experiential depth of Tawhid.
How so?
You find figures sometimes called intoxicated Sufis, like Mansur al-Hallaj, who famously declared An al-Haq, I am the truth, meaning identifying his essential reality with God's. Or Ibn Arabi's concept of Waddat al-Wujud, the unity of being.
Unity of being.
Yeah, the view that everything that exists is fundamentally a manifestation, a tajalli or self-disclosure of the single divine reality. The path for the Sufi often involves fana.
Annihilation.
Annihilation of the false, separate self, the ego, in order to realize the underlying unity with the divine.
And back in the West, we mentioned Descartes. Did anyone counter him with a non-dual view?
Baruch Spinoza did, quite directly. Reacting to Descartes' two substances, Spinoza argued there's only one infinite substance.
Just one.
Just one. He called it God or nature, Deusi Nashra. And what Descartes saw as two substances, mind and matter, Spinoza saw as merely two attributes or ways of understanding this single substance. He completely dissolved the interaction problem by denying the separation from the start.
Okay, so we've got Advaita, Shunyata, Tao, Sufi unity, Spinoza, lots of flavors of oneness. You mentioned people use monism and non-duality sometimes. Are they the same?
That's a really important point, actually. They often get used interchangeably, but there's a subtle difference. Monism, like Spinoza's view, typically makes a positive claim. All is one substance, or all is God.
Okay, an assertion.
Right. Non-duality, on the other hand, especially stemming from the Sanskrit Advaita, which literally means not to,
Advaita, not to,
is fundamentally a negation. It denies the ultimate reality of separation, duality, two-ness. It doesn't necessarily posit a single stuff underneath everything. Buddhist Shunyata, for example, denies any underlying substance, making it non-dual, but arguably not monistic in the same way as Spinoza.
That's a useful distinction. And even within these non-dual views, the status of the world seems different.
Absolutely. For Advaita Vedanta, the world is ultimately Maya, an illusion to be transcended to realize Brahman.
Right.
For Taoism, the world of yin and yang is a real dynamic expression of the Tao, something to be harmonized with.
Live within it skillfully.
And for someone like Ibn Arabi in Sufism, the world is a real reflection, a self-disclosure of God, both immanent within it and transcendent beyond it, different textures of oneness.
We've covered a lot of ground mapping out these philosophical ideas, but how does this translate into practice? What happens when people actually try to experience these states?
Yeah, that's where it gets really interesting, because different contemplative practices seem to align very directly with these worldviews, some reinforcing that subject-object split, others aiming deliberately to dissolve it.
Okay, let's start with practices in a more dualistic framework, like devotional practices.
Exactly. Think about Christian meditation practices like Lectio Divina, sacred reading, or contemplative prayer, often involving focusing on a sacred word or image. These generally operate within an I-thou relationship.
You and God.
Right. The practitioner, the I, seeks deeper communion, intimacy, relationship with a distinct divine other, the thou. The goal isn't usually to dissolve the self into God, but to draw nearer in relationship.
Makes sense. What about basic concentration meditation, focusing on the breath, that sort of thing?
Many foundational techniques, often grouped under samatha or calm abiding meditation, are inherently dualistic in their structure. You, the meditator,
The subject.
are observing an object, like the breath or counting or a mantra. This is crucial for training the mind, developing focus, stabilizing attention.
Building the muscle.
Exactly. But notice it fundamentally reinforces that structure. I am watching that.
Okay, so if those practices train the observer, how do non-dual practices work? Do they try to get rid of the observer?
And not exactly get rid of, but more like investigate it, deconstruct it. This is where you see practices specifically designed to probe that subject-object structure. A prime example is self-inquiry or Atma-vichara, famously taught by Ramana Maharshi.
The who am I question.
That's the one. But it's not about finding a conceptual answer like I am awareness or I am consciousness. The practice is to turn attention away from objects, thoughts, feelings, sensations, and relentlessly trace that feeling of I, that subject sense, back to its source.
Following the I thought.
Yes. The idea is that the individual I thought, the ego, is borrowing its light from the underlying true self. By tracking it back, the limited I subsides, revealing the pure, non-dual self, what Ramana sometimes called the I, the real I.
So the goal isn't an idea, but the subsidence of the seeker.
Precisely. It's a direct path. And this points to a broader principle in many non-dual approaches. Awareness isn't something you create through practice.
It's already here.
It's recognized as always already present. The practice is about removing the obstacles to that recognition. This might involve just resting as awareness, that open, knowing quality, without getting snagged by the contents arising within it.
Awareness of awareness itself.
Yes. Or in some traditions like Tibetan Dzogchen or Zen, or with modern teachers, you find pointing out instructions.
What's that?
It's where a teacher uses words or gestures to directly point the student to the non-dual nature of their own immediate experience, their own mind. It can sometimes bypass years of preparatory practice by marking that direct recognition.
So putting it together, it sounds like you're saying the dualistic practices like concentration aren't necessarily bad or wrong, but maybe they're often a kind of groundwork.
Exactly that. They stabilize the mind, develop concentration, clarify the observer. They build the capacity needed. Then, the non-dual practices often involve this deliberate, inversion of attention.
Inversion.
Instead of awareness flowing outward towards objects, as it usually does.
Which the concentration practice refines.
Right. Instead, attention turns inward, either to investigate the source of the I, like in self-inquiry, or to simply rest in, or as, the field of awareness itself. And in that inward turn, the insight can arise that there's no separate subject that can be found as an object. The observer itself dissolves into the observing.
The distinction just collapses.
The perceived distinction collapses, revealing the underlying unity.
Okay, this is where it gets really fascinating, because modern science is actually starting to, map some of this stuff, right? Where ancient wisdom meets the lab. How does all this talk about duality and non-duality connect with, say, psychological well-being and what's actually happening in the brain?
It's truly remarkable, the convergence we're seeing. The first-person reports from contemplatives over centuries are finding echoes in the objective data from neuroscience. Psychologically, first off, holding a rigid mind-body dualism can sometimes be unhelpful, especially in contexts like psychiatry. Well, the old idea that mental illness is purely all in the mind, separate from the body or brain, can lead to stigma, self-blame, and inadequate treatment. It ignores the deep interconnectedness. Also, just our general human tendency towards rigid, black and white thinking, good, bad, self-other, can limit our psychological flexibility when dealing with life's complexities.
Right, getting stuck in categories.
Exactly. Now, contrast that with non-dual perspectives, concepts like self-transcendence.
Feeling connected to something larger.
Yeah, decreased focus on the narrow, separate self, and an increased feeling of connection to others, to nature, to the universe. Think about peak experiences like awe or being in a state of flow. You kind of forget yourself for a bit.
Totally absorbed.
Research consistently shows these experiences correlate strongly with greater life satisfaction, a sense of meaning, purpose, and more pro-social behavior like compassion and altruism.
And we even see therapeutic approaches drawing on this, right? Like feeding your demons.
That's a great example, developed by Lama Tsultrim Alyon. It draws on Tibetan Buddhist ideas. Instead of fighting difficult emotions or demons, you compassionately engage with them, feed them what they need, which integrates them. It's based on the non-dual insight that these demons are projections of our own polarized mind.
Fascinating. Okay, what about the brain itself? What's going on under the hood?
One of the biggest discoveries in recent decades has been the default mode network, the DMN.
Right, I've heard of that. That's like the brain's idling engine.
Sort of. It's a network of brain regions that's most active when we're not focused on a specific external task. It's heavily involved in mind wandering, thinking about ourselves, our past, our future, essentially generating our narrative sense of self, the mind stories.
The storyteller in the head?
Pretty much. And here's the kicker. Numerous studies have found that experienced meditators, particularly those practicing non-dual awareness or mindfulness techniques, show significantly decreased activity in the DMN during meditation, and sometimes even as a lasting trait.
Wow. So the brain network churning out the self story quiets down.
Exactly. It provides a direct neural correlate for that subjective experience of the ego, the separate self, becoming less dominant, less solid. It strongly suggests the self isn't some fixed entity located somewhere, but an ongoing process the brain constructs.
A process that can be quieted.
Precisely. And there's more. Expert non-dual meditators also show increased high-amplitude gamma brainwaves.
Gamma waves? What are those linked to?
They're associated with heightened awareness, cognitive integration, insight, and states of intense focus and clarity. Some researchers propose they might reflect the subjective experience of a unified field of consciousness.
A brain signature of unity?
Possibly, but maybe the most mind-bending finding is something called neurotemporal non-duality.
Okay, neurotemporal brain time. Break that down for us.
Okay, imagine your brain processing different things, say an external sound, versus an internal thought or feeling. Normally, the brain processes these on slightly different timescales, different internal rhythms. There's a measurable neural signature for internal focus versus external focus.
Like different channels?
Kind of. But researchers studying very advanced meditators, people with decades of non-dual practice, found something astonishing. In these individuals, the neural distinction between the timescales for processing internal states and external stimuli disappear.
It disappeared. What does that mean?
It means at this fundamental level of temporal processing, their brains were no longer making a sharp distinction between self and world, between inner and outer.
Whoa.
The boundary seems to dissolve not just conceptually, but in the very way the brain processes reality second by second.
So the brain itself stops drawing that line. It's not just a belief, it's a change in fundamental processing.
That's what the research strongly suggests. It's a profound potential rewiring. The ancient idea that the egoic self is a construct, an illusion, now has this stunning parallel in the lab with the DMN quieting down. And this neurotemporal finding suggests the self-world boundary itself might be more fluid, more malleable than we ever imagined.
Okay, if we take all this seriously, this deep dive into duality, non-duality, the philosophy, the practice, the neuroscience, what are the really big implications for how we actually live? How does this change who we think we are?
Well, it potentially changes everything. These insights challenge some of our most fundamental, deeply ingrained assumptions. Think about free will, personal identity. They offer a radically different perspective, potentially leading to, well, greater freedom and less suffering.
Okay, free will. That's a classic philosophical headache. How does the non-dual view handle that? Does it say we have it or we don't?
It kind of sidesteps the whole debate, in a way. The endless argument between determinism and free will in the West assumes there's a separate autonomous chooser, an ego, whose will is either free or determined.
Right, the little person inside making decisions.
The non-dual view questions that very premise. Is there actually a separate chooser entity to be free or determined in the first place?
Ah, okay, so it dissolves the problem.
Advaita Vedanta, for example, often talks about two levels of reality. At the conventional relative level, Vyavaharika, yes, the body-mind complex appears to make choices, and we experience a sense of agency. Yes, functional.
We act as if we choose.
But at the absolute level, Paramarthika, there's only the non-acting, non-dual self, Brahman. From that perspective, there's no individual doer. So the ultimate freedom isn't freedom of the will for the ego.
But freedom from the will.
Freedom from the illusion of being a separate, burdened doer who is constantly responsible for controlling everything.
Yeah.
Actions still happen, obviously. The body-mind responds to situations.
It goes on.
But they're seen more as a spontaneous unfolding of the whole, rather than my personal accomplishment or failure. There's a release from that burden of authorship.
That's a huge shift. And what about personal identity? Who am I if not this collection of memories, traits, this body?
From the non-dual perspective, that conventional I, the personality, the history, the roles we play, is seen as a transient, conditioned mental construct.
A story.
A story the mind tells itself, built up over time. It's real as a story, but it's not our fundamental nature, not who we are at the deepest level.
So the invitation is?
To shift your sense of identity. From identifying solely with that limited, fluctuating, ultimately illusory ego, to recognizing your true identity as the pure, unchanging, universal awareness or consciousness. The Atman, which is Brahman.
And that's self-realization.
That's the term, yes. And it's said to lead to profound fearlessness because the true self is unborn and undying, untouched by the world's changes. And also to true selflessness, not in the sense of being a doormat, but in the sense that your identity expands beyond the skin-encapsulated ego to include everything. Compassion arises naturally.
Okay, but how does this look day to day? Does someone who realizes this just sit under a tree? Doesn't mean withdrawing from life.
Not necessarily. Not at all for most traditions.
Right.
It's generally seen as enabling more full, free, and effective engagement with the world. Remember the Zen saying,
Before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water.
after enlightenment, chop wood, carry water.
The activities don't change, but the experience of doing them does.
Exactly. The activities continue, but they're performed without the same level of egoic attachment, anxiety, and self-interest. There's a lightness of being, an ability to respond to life's ups and downs with greater equanimity, wisdom, and compassion, precisely because you're not so caught up in the illusion of being a separate self that needs to protect itself and control everything.
And there are contemporary teachers making this accessible now, right? Using those pointing out instructions you mentioned?
Yes, teachers like Rupert Spira, Mooji, Adyashanti, and others, they often focus on guiding people towards the direct, immediate recognition of their inherent nature as awareness, often bypassing elaborate philosophical systems or long preparatory stages. They emphasize that what you're seeking is the awareness that is presently aware, right here, right now.
Just look and see.
In essence, yes. Though, of course, conditioning runs deep. There's also a more radical fringe, sometimes called Neo-Advaita.
Neo-Advaita, how's that different?
Thinkers like Tony Parsons, for example, take the non-dual conclusion there is no separate self, literally as the starting and ending point. They assert there's no path, no practice needed, no teacher, no student, because there's no separate individual to practice or attain anything.
Nothing to do, nowhere to go.
Pretty much. It challenges all traditional notions of gradual paths or effort, saying any effort reinforces the illusion of a doer who needs to achieve something. It's a very stark message.
That idea is really something. That freedom isn't about proving my will is free, but liberation from the whole burden of being the doer who has to choose and control everything. That's, a profound shift. So we started with that basic feeling, didn't we? That me versus the world.
Mm-hmm.
And today we've journeyed through how humanity has tried to understand that building these intricate dualistic maps, mind versus body, Purusha versus Prakriti, creator versus creation.
Necessary maps in many ways.
But also maps that create their own problems. And then we explored the countercurrent, the profound insight of non-duality, the realization of a seamless, undivided reality. Advaita, Shunyata, Tao.
The journey from seeing separation everywhere to recognizing an underlying unity. And incredibly, finding support for this ancient wisdom in modern science.
Yeah, that convergence is just stunning. Contemplatives talking about the ego dissolving.
And neuroscience, showing the DMN, the self-story network, quieting down.
Or the brain literally blurring the lines between inner and outer worlds at a basic time processing level.
Groundbreaking stuff.
It really is. So thinking about all this, if that perception of separation, that fundamental duality, really is the root of so much of our suffering, our conflict, our alienation.
Which many traditions suggest it is.
And if our own brains seem capable, at least potentially, of dissolving that distinction, of experiencing reality as undivided, what does that open up? What new possibilities emerge for us personally, maybe even collectively, if we start to truly explore and maybe even live from this undivided reality? What boundaries, maybe, are you willing to question in your own experience?